Election 2012, what went right, what went wrong? What is the message of the election results for President Obama, as well as for the Republican Party? Our guest right now, political analyst, former state representative in Connecticut, Chris Niedermeier. First, let's talk the presidential situation. I thought that if President Obama had not won, it would have been due, at least in some measure, maybe even great part, due to his poor performance in that first debate. And then he tried to recover in the second and third, at times maybe even appearing a little desperate to some people and that sort of thing. So why did he win?
Well, a number of different factors. I think you have to almost go back to the summer when Ryan was selected as the running mate for Romney. You question, why did he do that? He did that because he needed to solidify his base among the Republican Party, particularly the right wing. But by doing that, you remember when that was announced, both parties said it was great. The Republicans thought that was great, and the Democrats thought that was great. But you know, in the long run, the Democrats were right, because by putting Ryan on that ticket, it solidified that part of the base, which Romney needed to do, because people thought he was sort of all over the park and had been a moderate as governor of Massachusetts. But by doing that, it energized all of the traditional Democratic constituency groups. From the convention on, you know, the seniors who were concerned about Medicare vouchers. You can go across the board to all the interest groups that were affected by the Ryan budget. And that's why in the debates, while Romney did a great job in the first one, he kept trying to moderate himself every debate. And as it got toward the end, the Obama camp was very smart in starting to come out with the Romnesia, and you can't trust him. So I think when it came down to it, you're right. We talked about the two Ps in this campaign, who can perform and produce and who has the best policies. I think people related to Obama better. They thought his middle-class policies were ones that showed that he understood them. And Ryan, at the end, was seen as someone who could be a stronger leader, but people were a little concerned about, could they trust him? Were they taking a risk in voting for them? What were his policies? Was it the Romney you saw in the summer when he selected Ryan, or was it the Romney that you saw toward the end of the campaign? Well,
and I know Governor Romney desperately wanted to win Wisconsin, but he didn't.
He didn't.
The home state of Ryan.
And Wisconsin has always been traditionally Democratic. I think he felt with Ryan that he would pick that up. But you know, a couple of the other factors, all those polls that showed it nip and tuck, that helped Obama, because the Democratic base goes beyond the likely voter base of a lot of the polls, and so he needed to get out a lot of the people that don't normally come out. Here in Connecticut, I guess the turnout, Denise Merrill was saying, was somewhere between 78 and 80%, so it was comparable to 4 years ago. People didn't think that would have happened, but they had an excellent ground game. They had people angry about the economy still and wanting to come out, and the closeness of the national vote showed that it was so nip and tuck, but that got more people out. The ground game got more people out, and when you get out more registered voters, you bring in those transients, you bring in the cell phone users that aren't reflected in the polls, and it helped him in the long run.
Do you think the president's going to have an easier time in the second term, now that the Republicans don't have a target, you know, of saying we got to deny him another term, because there's not going to be another term?
You know, that is an excellent point. You're not going to have Mitch McConnell making that his #1 goal right after the election. On the other hand, you know, Washington, D.C. there's an old saying, 67 square miles surrounded by reality. And and I served down there, both on the House and the Senate side, on the staff and in the Clinton administration. And because of the 24/7 news cycle, a lot of members of Congress don't have the guts to take the positions because it comes back and bites them right away, because of the enormous influence of money in this country, and because they don't build the relationships that they used to. Years ago, congressmen and senators didn't go back to their states all the time because the budget wasn't there to do it. So they were able to build the relationships, and that's what President Obama needs to do. You know, if he's had one Achilles heel, in addition to not producing and not leading as much as people want him to do, he doesn't build the relationships. Even Democrats in the House and the Senate say he hasn't built those relationships like Bill Clinton did and like LBJ did. He needs to roll up his sleeves and push, whether it's Simpson Bowls or something else. But if he doesn't play that instrumental role, I think it will be more of the same.
Let's talk about the Senate race in Connecticut. Linda McMahon retooled her image, trying to appeal more to women, and yet Chris Murphy outdid her by a 3-2 margin in the women's vote, and she didn't win. She lost by, what was it, 11 points in Connecticut?
Right, which was pretty much close to her 12% margin that she lost to Dick Blumenthal. You know, I know, having run as a woman for Congress and state rep in Connecticut, that sometimes it is hard for women candidates to get support of other women, particularly if if you're a career woman, polls often show that.
And you have this pile of money,
well,
that,
right.
$100 million in 2 campaigns of her own money.
And that ended up being a negative for her because she spent so much money. She came out of the gates very strong in August, right after the primaries, and went heavy, heavy, heavy negative on Murphy. And so rather than, I think she felt she had some positives left from the last campaign in terms of her image. She tried to soften her image a little bit so that she could get more of that women's vote, but she came so heavy and hard against him that she hadn't solidified her positives, and so that affected her negatives. And also the women's vote and the seniors vote. Those were 2 that she lost significantly again. The senior vote, I think, in large part because of that Social Security ad that a lot of us felt wasn't accurate, right?
Well, you're right. She said that, you know, she believed in the case of laws like Social Security, programs like that, you have to look at them from time to time to see if they're working, and if not, get rid of them. So there has to be a sunset provision where you can get rid of it if you need to. She didn't say she was going to do away with Social Security, but that's the message that Murphy put out there. Exactly.
The only valid point of that is that by misusing that term, by failing to talk to the editorial boards of the newspapers till the end, by using a lot of talking points in her positions, or like, for example, in Medicare, saying, well, I'm not going to tell you if I'm for vouchers or not, but I'm not going to cut Medicare benefits, and I'll tell you after the election. There were a lot of issues where she showed that she really wasn't ready to step up to the plate. And I think in the long run that the overspending, the over negative, which they both did a lot of, and in both cases there were a lot of false statements out there, I think came back and bit her at the end.
And Murphy's seat in Congress was open, and Elizabeth Esty, on the other hand, came through and beat Andrew Rohrabaugh, this battle of moderates.
Yeah, a very tight race, and because Rohrabaugh was moderate, I think he had a better shot. I think her advantage was that she had 2 sets of coattails. Like Murphy, she had the Obama coattails at the top, with him winning by 17 or 18% versus 22% last time, a big margin. And then, of course, with her running in Chris Murphy's old district, she had the support of his coattails that were well worn there, and I'm sure were helpful toward the end.
And do you think now that the Republican Party, after what happened with the presidential race, is going to be looking at finding ways to bring more people into the fold, the minorities in particular, the Hispanics and African Americans and so on, getting more of those people into the Republican fold somehow, appealing to them? You're
absolutely right. They need to appeal to minorities, Hispanics, and blacks. Overwhelmingly, Obama won those groups. But they also need to broaden their tent philosophically, and that's been a problem. You know, there used to be the Lowell Weikers of the world and the Chris Shays of the world in the Republican Party, and nationally there aren't that many. It seems to have been taken over in many cases by the Tea Party candidates and by some right-wing candidates, and they need to, if they don't broaden their tent, like the Democratic Party has done more successfully, they're going to lose elections. And I think this year was a wake-up call, particularly some of those U.S. Senate seats that they lost, where they should be picking up 3 or 4 seats in the Senate, and they've lost 2 already in the U.S. Senate.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. Chris Niedermeier, thanks
great.
so much for coming in. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Always good to see you, too, Al.
And we're going to talk more politics a little later when we get to our current guys, political editor Rick Green and reporter John Lender will give their take on the election winners and losers coming up.
All right, Al, we're